Okay, well, welcome everybody to our second Tuesday talk, and I am glad that so many of you made it to our new time. We're doing this now in the afternoons this year. So now all of our Tuesday talks are at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much for doing that. And our special guest today is going to be Carol Bailey. Carol had moved to Southport just within the last couple of years, so we're very excited that she's doing a presentation for us. It just shows that you don't have to have lived in Southport for a long time to be able to know some of its history and to be able to share it. So I encourage anybody else who'd like to maybe do a presentation to get in touch. I can help you come up with a topic if you don't have one off the top of your head. Carol also invited a couple of special guests with her that I'm going to let her talk to you about. But when Carol moved to Southport, she moved into one of our historic homes in Southport, and she has been working to renovate the home and also find out more about the history of the home. And so she's going to share that with us today, talking about the Dosher Hardee house. So Carol, would you like to get started?
Sure. Thanks, Liz. I appreciate your support here. And it's I love being in Southport. This has been such a very uplifting and an interesting experience for me. And I thank everybody for participating for today. And we'll go through the next hour or so a little bit of what Southport means to me, and the home that I purchased, and the experiences, and most importantly, the love that I feel from this house and its family. So we'll get started. So the story begins a long time ago. A gentleman that some of you may be familiar with, his name, Harry Lee Dosher, thought about having a 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a traditional Southern style home. And in 1927, he purchased this property from a local gentleman who was a developer in the area, Jack Robbins. And the property was on the corner of Howe and Leonard Streets, which was not considered, at that point, it was not downtown. That was actually in the country back in the day in Southport. So Harry started building this house. He wanted to basically raise chickens, plant a garden, have a very nice, peaceful life, and just kind of live out and enjoy this countryside. Somewhere along the line, however, he got sick and was forced to board up the house, and the house basically just stood still for a few years. So the love story begins with a gentleman coming up from Florida named Louis Hardee. And he was a net maker in Florida. His family were shrimpers in the area and came into the Southport area. He started a company called the Colonial Shrimp Company, and started operating a shrimp packing plant all the way at the end of Howe Street. He attended a dance one day in 4th of July in the wonderful year of 1934 and met a charming young lady named Dorothy Dosher. She was a native Southport. She was very well known for her athletic ability. She was a very wonderful artist, and she was very, very active in the church. And the love story evolves. They got married here on January 6th, 1935. And as you note the date, they just had an anniversary here several days ago. They went ahead and they purchased the property that the Brunswick Motor Company had been built on, and there was a house next door. And most importantly, because of his love for his wife, Louis named Dorothy Sweetheart. And from that point on, everybody in Southport, everybody that knew Dorothy, that was her name. Nobody, I think, ever called her Dorothy again. She was always known to everybody as Sweetheart. So Sweetheart and Louis had 3 sons, Louis Jr., Michael, and Dawn. And I would like to introduce my very special guest on the line, Sweetheart's granddaughter, Kimberly Hardee-Trapp.
Good morning. I'm very grateful to be here, and grateful to Carol for including the family in the process of her renovating this home, and letting us share the stories of the house and our experience of the house and memories. And I'm very thankful to be here. And I'm pretty sure my dad is online. I'm not sure if he's gotten on video yet.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes.
Dad's, you just can't see him, and I don't know why.
Click.
My dad, Michael Hardee, is on the line here. So you can hear him, but you won't be able to see him yet.
Yeah, okay.
There he is.
Yay.
Okay, there we go. He's listed as Emma Hardee on here, but it's Michael.
I'm Emma.
Did you
So,
want to say anything?
so Michael, do you have any stories that you can kind of tell us growing up, what you remember of the house and your wonderful mother, sweetheart?
Well, the house, let's see. I don't know when we moved in it, probably shortly after World War II. Of course, we played hide and seek in the crawl space underneath. We played hide and seek. The upstairs, let me back up a minute. The story I got was when Daddy was about 12 and lived in Fernandina, he had to carry coal to the second story. So he did not want a second story house. So they cut the top off and finished construction as a one story. And later they converted the attic into 2 bedrooms and a bath. And the wall, behind the walls, you could crawl all the way around the house behind those walls upstairs, and we would play hide and seek up there. We'd have to be careful not to step through the rafters, tear up the ceiling downstairs. I don't think anybody ever fell through.
That's a good story. And as I was doing the renovation, I appreciate those rafters as I had one of the workers who was downstairs doing some work in the kitchen, and somebody upstairs moved something in the attic and it fell all the way through the rafters and came down and just barely missed the young man that was doing work in the kitchen. So I have a good feel for those rafters and the how tricky that might have been, and especially for playing hide and seek. Do you remember this photo, Michael, of the skating party? You're I think the first one there.
Yes. I guess I don't remember the skating party. Well, the house and property was purchased. Where those people are in that skating party, my grandfather had started I think the Brunswick Motor Company. He was a mechanic. And I can remember that property, and we would throw rocks at the windows. It was all dilapidated. Later it was torn down, but it left that concrete pad at the corner of Howe and Leonard Street. And that's where that skating party occurred.
Very cool.
I don't remember. Back then, that was the big thing. Everybody gets skates at Christmas. It was probably I don't know when that party was. Oh, Lou's birthday, January the 17th.
And that's almost coming up on an anniversary as well.
Yeah. So I guess I don't remember that particular skating party, but that was 70 years ago. So I'm entitled. I was 10 at the time.
Good. Hopefully the photograph will bring back some memories. And I would imagine that a number of these people that are listed on here are still around.
Yes and no. Probably half of them are gone.
No. So as we continue through Southport life in the 30s through the 50s, is Lewis's shrimping industry was starting to flourish, and that's the bullet here at the top. Lewis had his crews saw off the second story of the house just so it looked like a modern house in the 1930s style. And of course, late in the 30s and into the 40s, as the shrimps in the Gulf Coast were becoming more active, Lewis's fleet would follow the shrimp down in the Gulf area, and he traveled extensively through Florida and Louisiana.
They always have to follow where the shrimp are.
Okay. Do you remember this photo in the center here?
I remember the photo, but I don't remember the day it was taken.
And as you notice, the front of the house had this round porch covering over the top. We found a few photos from the Historical Society that had this picture on it with that round porch, which of course has been long gone. And Tara was the name I understand that Lou gave the house. Lou Jr. gave the house. It was kind of his place of refuge and security. And I think, as Michael had mentioned, in the 1940s, additional construction occurred on the house to where there were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom that were added into the attic space. In the front, you can see the lower corner here, a brick porch was added. And Grandfather Dosher got these columns from Fort Caswell Salvage. And of course, Sweetheart up there in the top corner was elected as the first president of the Southport Garden Club in 1949. And it is the story that I heard from one of the local people said she actually started that in my dining room. That started the concept, and that's where they had their first couple meetings, was actually at the house in the 40s. So very nice tribute to Sweetheart here.
I doubt the upstairs was built per code because it's only like a little over 6 foot clearance.
That was true up until several months ago. Yes, you're absolutely correct, Michael. You had to be not a tall person to go through those bedroom doors. So one of the unique components of the house is, and Michael had alluded to that too, is in World War II, in the mid 40s, the Hardees all moved down to Louisiana following the shrimp, and they had rented the house to a young man with the Navy, Chief Petty Officer Bill Lucas, and his wife Mary, and their 2 young daughters. And one winter they enjoyed a nice fire in the fireplace, and then went to bed shortly afterward. And as the story goes, Bill smelled smoke, and the house was starting to burn down. So he grabbed his wife and 2 daughters, and they escaped through the kitchen intact. The fire truck, which was up there in the upper corner, came by, and the firemen were trying to get into the house. So they basically broke the door down to get into the house to extinguish the fire, and later found out that the front door had been unlocked all this time, and they just could have easily just opened it up. But we see a picture of the fire truck. This is the same fire truck that was in a 4th of July parade. I think the date on that is 1998. Back in the 2009, there was some remodeling done on the house. And as the stories go from then, literally when they took the walls out and they were, the workers were down to the joists and the studs, you could smell the smoke as if the fire had just occurred. And we actually validated that when I was doing the remodel here in 2020, last year now. And we got into the master bedroom, or the front bedroom, which is where Bill and his wife were sleeping. You can see the extensive char marks on the floor. This is a heart pine, which my contractor felt was from the 1800s, prior to the house being built. And we could see a lot of damage to the floorboards. The ceiling in that bedroom, there was a lot of damage to the ceiling, a lot of burn marks to the ceiling, which all those joists had to come out. And then on the far end of the floor, you could see deep grooves, deep gashes where the embers had burned all the way across the room. So there was quite a bit of damage, much more so than what they initially thought. And as we started peeling away the layers of the house and getting down below the first layer of the floor, and you could actually see that damage. So what's any good contractor remodeling going to do is we just left it there and waxed on over it, and now it's kind of an interesting little memorial to the history of the house, looking at the and I see that every time I go into the bedroom and think about how terrified Bill and his family must have been back in the day. And then in the 50s, Lewis was partners with Dallas, and they had some boats down here on the far end of House Street on the dock, and that you see the boat in the back, the trawler, was what they named the Dorothy and Lila. Leela, thank you. And of course, this was right before one of the most memorable events that had happened to the Southport area. And as you look at this set of pictures, this is that same boat that we saw in the previous picture, and it had survived the storm somehow, but as we're all aware of, that Lewis's shrimp dock and packing plant did not. Michael, do you remember much about the storm?
Not before the storm, but some afterwards. I remember things. Yeah, that's the lower right. I think that's a sea. Is that the Sea Rambler? That was Daddy's boat. Our neighbors in Morgan City live next door to us. They resided in Southport in that house right there in front of that trawler. Luckily, they ran aground before they hit the house.
Yeah, I bet it was quite a scary experience back then. Were you in Southport when that occurred?
Yes, I was 14. I guess we probably basically stayed in the house during all the big blow, but afterward we would get out. One thing I remember, I don't know if you have a picture of it. One of Daddy's trawlers, they were in the old yacht basin. Of course, this one floated and was blown toward that house. The other one stuck on the pilings at the edge of the yacht basin. Sunny Point was being built. The government sent down this big crane to come down, and they drug those two trawlers, I think put a big crane, hooked something to them, and pulled them across the land back to the yacht basin, and picked the one up that was on the pilings at the edge of the yacht basin and put it back in the water. So the government did come help us.
Yeah, I bet that was quite the experience to have lived through.
I do remember going over to the beach. This has nothing to do with Southport, but the road was washed up, and there were approximately 200 houses before the hurricane, and like only maybe half a dozen could even be made livable. Most of them were just gone.
Yeah, I think, Liz, you and the Historical Society have a number of photos from the hurricane.
Mostly taken by Art Newton. Took a lot of photos, and we have copies of those. And then we just this last summer last year, we had a donation of some additional snapshots that were taken by people around town.
Wonderful.
So.
Well, and let's hope that that'll be the last of the big hurricanes to hit this area. Fingers crossed. So as the house kind of evolved and the family was growing and flourishing, and around 1969, House Street was starting to pick up, and it was becoming noisier and in a much busier area. Lewis had this parcel of land across the way on Leonard Street, and he had just sold it to a gentleman and offered to go ahead and buy it back for $100, which was probably a fair amount of money at that time, or not. So here we have another anniversary. January was apparently a very important month in the Hardee family. So on the 26th of January, 1970, the house was moved. The entire house was picked up and moved about a block away to the corner of Leonard, East Leonard and North Atlantic Streets. Lewis finally put in central air conditioning. Up until then, the windows were all what they call the Florida style, or the jalousie windows, louvered windows. So air conditioning was a big deal back in the 70s. And one of the things I find very remarkable of the house is every single azalea and camellia bush were moved from the old location to the current location. And the gentleman that did the moving was a man named Clarence Jones. He was a master gardener from the Orton plantation, and even moved the grass, which my understanding, Michael, it actually had been put on trawlers and been moved up. It's the real thing, the real St. Augustine grass directly from St. Augustine. And interestingly enough, that St. Augustine grass still flourishes today. And there's probably 50 plus, maybe more than that, azalea bushes today, and probably easily a couple dozen of the camellia bushes, the bright pink and red ones that are blooming as we speak right now. And the pink ones, I understand, that were renamed after Clarence Jones, who was, when he passed away, he was 100 years old when he passed away. And the story I hear is the entire town shut down and all came to pay him tribute. He was such a wonderful and loved person within the city of Southport. And as you walk the property here, you see a lot of large chunks, mostly granite, other types of rocks, very large chunks around the garden areas. And I had asked somebody about that and found out that these were formerly ballast from ships. And somebody, I'm not sure who, over the years had brought them up, and now they're bordering the property. And every once in a while, when you're out there walking on the grounds here in the gardens, I'll stub my toe on one of these large chunks of rocks. But it's interesting to know where the history of those from all over the world. And they're probably, well, they're definitely thousands, hundreds of thousands of years old, but I'm sure each one of those rocks would have its own story to tell. So here we come up in 2017, a young lady named Carol Bailey, who was living in the Charlotte area, came into the Oak Island, the first time I'd ever been to Oak Island, and just absolutely was captivated by the Oak Island area. And a lot of my friends, when you have a beach house, you find all kinds of friends that come up, and a group of friends used to come over, and we all go over to Southport. We rarely spent time in Oak Island, but my group of colleagues and friends would all come over to Southport, and we'd walk up and down Howe Street and go shopping in all the stores and hit the restaurants. And I said, you know what, it would be kind of cool to have a historic house, wouldn't it? And my friends all turned to me and said, yeah, right. So I've always loved design, and I'm an engineer by trade, but I've always loved design and architecture, and have some family members that went into that business, and saw this historic house that happened to be for sale. And as I was coming up Atlantic Street and saw this large white house sitting in the corner property with a southern porch here, I said, this is it. I'm done looking. I think I found my gem. And of course, I purchased a house in 2019, and I'm a big fan of HGTV shows, and I see how all those wonderful designers and architects do wonderful things with these homes in about a 2-day span. So I thought, well, if they can do that, so can I. So decided to take on this weekend challenge, which became something closer to about 360 days in counting. So we purchased the Dosher Hardee house, and I started to dig into the history of the house. And in doing that, we started to transition Tara, and I got to know her very intimately, basically from the ground up and in the inside out. And you can see this picture on the far left. This used to be the outside wall of the house at one point before they built on in the kitchen area. They built on a kind of a side patio, which became enclosed. And this cypress planking, is my understanding, is Lewis had brought this up as well. And he had hand-picked out every one of these boards, and the entire room was paneled in this dark paneling. There were several rooms that were paneled in the dark paneling from the cypress. So you can see that kind of the mishmash of how these homes were constructed back in the day, this being kind of an exterior wall at one point in time, and made with many different, kind of a patchwork of different types of siding materials. This picture shows in the main bedroom on the first floor, the chimney, we ended up taking down because the chimney was compromised. The structure was compromised quite a bit from the fire. There was actually a brick wall that was about 5 feet tall in front of the chimney that was behind the drywall wall. You couldn't see until we took the walls down. So we ended up taking the chimney apart, took the fireplace out. This shot shows one of the, I think we end up adding about 7 beams total to the house for structural. And Michael, you had mentioned too that the ceilings were low in the upstairs, so we were able to raise all the ceilings, and we pushed back the attic here. This is the original floor, and this you can see is the attic space, and push the walls back and gain some additional room.
And that would have been my bedroom. And
this one back here?
One in the back, yeah. You go upstairs and it's in the north side.
Okay.
Lou had the front bedroom.
The one in the front? Okay.
And then Don was the last one, so he got last choice.
He's a lucky guy, huh?
He was probably downstairs because he was the youngest, and he stayed in the bedroom next to my parents.
And every time we would start opening up another room or start working on another room, all my furniture ended up getting moved from room to room to room to room. At one point, I had found a 100-year-old baby grand piano because a house of this type and this caliber just needed to have a 100-year-old piano to go with it. So I had purchased this piano, and it ended up in the kitchen for many, many months. Once we got the kitchen area finished, which was the first room we finished, we had the piano in there, and it was not playable. It was on its side. And I remember for several months kind of working around that piano saying, man, I can't wait to get this thing back up and operating and so I can play it again. So, but this picture on the far right is what the living room, and there's no less than 6 chairs that you can see in this photo, 6 out of my collection of 50 some chairs that I have right now. I'm not sure, for some reason I ended up collecting a lot of chairs. And for one person, that's an awful lot of places to sit. So one of the many unique things that we found in Tara was some of the treasures that were behind the walls and out of sight. And this particular piece of art was up in the upstairs wall. And now that you clarified that was in Lou's bedroom, Michael, thanks for that, letting us know that. We found this during the renovation. It was actually the wall, or part of the wall. And in order to get it out, we had to cut it out, hence the notch in the painting here. It's about 4 feet by almost 5 feet, and a kind of a drywall type material. And I'm not sure when it was painted, but Michael, you had told me the other day that this was a tree that Lou remembered from a place in the Georgia-Florida line, not too far from where your father grew up.
Yeah, it was Orange Bluff, and Daddy was born in Crandall. It's at, if you take I-95, as you cross the St. Mary's River, I don't know if it's on the left side or right side on the Florida side. And there was a photo of that oak tree, and Lou painted it in his bedroom. And Lou had a canary, and the canary would try to land in that tree. So until Lou's cat ate the canary.
Oh, that's a bit of a sad ending to a really happy story. It's quite unique. Do you have any idea when he painted that, Michael? Do you remember any of that when this was done?
No. I would guess the early 50s.
So this was also a surprise to you as well.
I'm not sure when the upstairs was converted into 2 more bedrooms.
Yeah, I thought it was very cool when the construction team called me and I came over to look at it, and I was just kind of amazed that something like this would be. And if we hadn't done the renovation, it may not have ever been found. This might have been behind the walls forever, and nobody ever would have known that this magnificent, priceless piece of art was upstairs hanging out in the house. So it was a nice tribute to your brother, Michael. Some of the other things, and of course the house eventually will give up its secrets if you coax it long enough. Some of the other items that we found in the house, on the top left here is a fishing permit. As you remember, Lewis was from Florida, and Florida was one of the areas where he spent a lot of time shrimping. And we found this, actually I found 2 of these small cards, permits of some type that from the state of Florida. And one of them I took and I donated to the Maritime Museum here in Southport. The card is about 4 by 6 inches. It's very small. Right below that is a metal, might have been a tag. I'm not sure if this is a tag for a boat, dated 1935-36, also from the state of Florida. And then we found a whole stack of the shipping labels from the Colonial Shrimp Company. And as you remember, that's the name of Lewis's company. Colonial Shrimp Company. And then surprisingly, about 4 pages of the Wilmington newspaper dated 1939. And one of the things I thought was very interesting is this kind of flying contraption. This was state of the art in 1939 of all years. And it had actually been in the Washington, D.C. area, as the article goes. And right underneath that is at the time, the world's oldest person, who was 97 years old in 1939. yeah, which means he must have been born in the, what, 1840s or so. So this paper is very old, very fragile. It's also got a listing of rentals for sale, and they had an entire house in Wilmington on the beach that was available for rent for the entire summer for about $125. So we've come a long way since the 1930s, but I thought that was very unique, and not sure how this paper, of course, the remodeling was going on in the 40s and 50s. So somehow this newspaper, for whatever reason, made its way into the house and was stuffed in a wall, only to be found this many years later in our 2020 remodel. So back to the second story, we'd mentioned that the raised the ceiling up and pushed the walls back, so we gained about 5 feet. So the best use of that space, I felt, was to turn it into a little library. So with the additional square footage here and with the additional height, my contractor designed this columns which matched the first floor columns, and we put shelving in it. And because of the low banister here, this was not, Michael, you mentioned too, was not really up to code. So rather than to take the banister out, we went ahead and we put another bookcase adjoining that. So the stairs are to the right of this bookcase, and it really kind of opened up the space. It gives a nice little, I needed a place to put all my books. And we had a gentleman that was at the estate sale that had bought a bunch of books from the Hardee house, had heard I was doing the remodel, and he knocked on the door one day and he had several boxes of books, and he said, "These books actually belong back in your house." So he gave me the books back, and they reside back in the proper place and on the bookshelf here. And once again, they live on through the lives of Sweetheart and Lewis and family. So I was very grateful to get their books once again back in the house where they came from. And of course, being a maritime seafaring house, there's no choice other than to put lots and lots and lots of shiplap. So many of the walls in the remodel became shiplap, and a lot of the ceilings became a beadboard. And one of the other gems on the second floor again was the luxurious pink, kind of a mauve-y, pinky, purpley bathroom. The original sink, probably, I'm not sure, Michael, do you remember when this sink and bathtub were installed? Do you have a approximate year vintage for these?
No, 1950 or so.
I tried to find them online, and this color's not made anymore. I was trying to match it up. The toilet is newer, but I initially was going to put a clawfoot bathtub in here, and after thinking about it and thinking I can't bear to cut up this lovely bathtub, so it stayed, and we built around it, and we kept the sink and built around it. And of course we pushed the ceiling up on this one, so we gained a little bit of height, and we had a little bit extra space here right behind the bathtub. And my contractor said, "What do you want to do with that?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to put a towel rack in." And he said, "Well, what do you want it to look like?" And I said, "Well, look at the wine rack that you put in the kitchen and do something like that." So he ended up putting a suspiciously looking towel rack in the bathroom, which quite nicely holds a number of bottles as well as towels. So
I think Lou picked that. Lou Jr. picked out the colors for his bathroom.
Okay, that would kind of make sense, because these colors are not found anymore, and they're quite unique. And finding a good paint color to match that was a little bit of a challenge, but we came up with a nice pink and a gray combination to kind of offset that. So
if I remember correctly, Carol, at one point during my childhood and growing up, there used to be, I believe it was it purple carpet, Dad, in that bathroom?
Yes.
Yeah.
You remember the purple carpet, huh?
Yes, I do.
Yes, it was quite the kind of like Lou, I guess a tribute to him, was a very colorful bathroom. And probably and I didn't get to see his room before when we moved into it, but I'm sure that probably had a lot of his expression, his art. I know Lou was very much into the art and music scene. He spent the last number of years up in New York, and very popular. Somebody had mentioned that he had written several plays. One that was done in 1976 called Revolution in Southport. And both you, Kimberly, and your dad probably remember some of that.
I believe I have the music and one of the original posters for that play
Awesome.
in my things that were brought here from Southport before the house sold.
That's wonderful. And Lou wrote the music score to that play.
Yes.
And my understanding, it was done with a lot of the New York theater effects. He had brought props and costumes and whatever else down. And I think I read a story where a lot of the props were made here in the house, actually in the living room floor for that production.
I believe there's also pictures that go along with some of that as well that are probably in the boxes of pictures that I have from the house.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, it sounds like, Liz, at some point we'll have to do a follow-up presentation for your historical society with a lot of these treasures that Kimberly and her dad have from the original house here.
Yeah, that would be great.
So some more photos of renovating the house. You know, people said it'll be fun, won't it? You know, renovating the house. And you're so lucky to be doing a renovation. And I thought, yeah, I need a place to live while there's no walls and no floors. And at one point, my little model here, Charlotte Ann, got through the kitchen and got into the bathroom adjoining the hall bathroom in the first floor, and I couldn't find her for about a day. And she popped up she's a tuxedo, and the white portion on her was covered with dirt and dust and decades worth of who knows what down from the crawl space. And we quickly boarded that space up so she couldn't get back down into the house again. But yeah, it took, we started from the ground up, probably added 30 new piers under the house, said 7 or 8 new beams through the rafters for support. At one point in time, this was Lou's bedroom, the front bedroom, and the sink moved from the bathroom to the bedroom to store it there, and it became a nice work table. The workers were using it for their some of their drawings and whatever. And as a lot of you know, one of the very treasured artifacts that we have here in Southport are the Southport bows, and we ended up putting a Southport bow. This was the particular one for this house. Each bow is unique to that particular house, brings the character of the house. And we ended up putting Southport bows on every single door frame and every single window on the first floor, and it really brings that character. These all have the fluted columns that match this is the upstairs library before we moved back into it. But and I went through probably 50 shades of green paint at least. We painted the walls when I first moved in this shade of green and to make kind of a Palm Beach look, and then that kind of got passed over to be something a little more subtle. So it was a lot of work. Added a new back. This is the back of the house, and a new deck off the dining room area. It gave it a little bit of height and some additional seating back here.
Carol?
Yes, ma'am.
Does that deck that you added back there, does that have doorways from what used to be the sunroom and the dining room, or is that just?
Yeah, it actually, and the sunroom is now that's where I'm sitting right now. This is my my office here. We have a set of French doors from the office, and the dining room here was this used to be a window, and put a set of doors off the dining room area. And the wallpaper, wallpaper's making a bit of a comeback here. This is what I call the glam 40s, or 40s glam look. This is a very large magnolia bloomed wallpaper, and it really kind of, I remember from my grandparents' house, the large wallpaper they had from the 40s, and I wanted to kind of bring that back. And the furniture in this dining room is all antique oak from the 40s. So it really, when you walk around the house now, you kind of walk from a combination of mid-century modern to boho glam to 40s glam back to a bit of a modern kitchen with the sea theme to it. So you've got a little bit of eclecticism built into the house, but everything is kind of unique, and it all just kind of goes back to the style of the house and keeping the character of Sweetheart and Lewis and their family alive, even here 100 years, almost 100 years later. And as I mentioned, the good bones, this on the left here, this was the Southport bow over the dining room area, which was this entranceway here that we took out. And some unique story about this area. The ceiling here, this room is actually about 22 by 22 feet square, and it's a very unusually large living room for back in the day. And there used to be a hallway somewhere here at some point in time in the house. And as my contractor, as we were tearing out some of the walls to reframe and shore them up a little bit, my contractor looked up on the ceiling and he said, "Was this house built by people that knew how to build ships?" And I said, "Yeah, how do you know that?" And he said, "Look how these joists in the ceiling here are all sistered together." He said, "This is a very unique way of building." He said, "I don't see that in houses. That's not a architectural style for a house." He said, "But it very much so is for boats." And I thought that was, he didn't know anything about the history of the house. I thought that was a very interesting comment, that he actually picked up on the fact that somebody who knew how to build ships actually had a hand in building this house. And once again, we never would have seen that unless we took the walls down and exposed a lot of this, these good deep bones from back in the day, and how this house was built and built over the time from the late 20s into the 40s, 50s, even up until 2009 when they did the previous remodel. And you can see the chimney. This is when we took out the walls in the back bedroom, in the front bedroom, the master bedroom. You can see the char marks on the chimney, and this is the one that we ended up taking down, each brick. But that's kind of the evidence of how bad that fire was. And then this is in Michael's room, this corner picture here. This was when we took the ceiling down. You can see how intricate this dormer was actually built, structurally very sound, there was never a leak, I would imagine it was probably fairly quiet, Michael, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have a lot of noise from that back because it was so tight and so well built. And then we ended up doing spray foam with the modern, put insulation everywhere, new vapor barrier underneath, and all the upstairs we put this spray insulation just to make sure that we weren't going to have any issues with losing our heat, etc.
Carol, just a point. I noticed a lot of the older homes in Southport, you'd go in the front door and you turn left and they would have living rooms. You know, the hall would go down.
Uh-huh.
I think this was probably originally designed that way, but they never had the hallway. So that's where you got the 20 by 20 foot living room.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because it was almost, technically that living room would have been overspanned, but the way it was built, it actually held the support. And keep in mind that when the house was moved in 1970, as I understand, the only damage was some cracking of the tiles that surrounded the fireplace, and everything else survived that entire move. And we were able to validate that during those, as we took pretty much everything out and put back everything else. So another story about the dream kitchen in 1952, Sweetheart decided that it was time to remodel the kitchen, and she had very distinct ideas about how she wanted that kitchen to look, and had a discussion with her husband about that, and took off for a few days and came back, and the kitchen was nowhere near what Sweetheart had envisioned. And both you, Kimberly, and Michael can maybe weigh in on this. My understanding that was the first time they ever had an argument, or let me say maybe they had a difference of opinion what the kitchen should look like.
Yeah.
and of course, Sweetheart got her way, right, Michael?
Yeah, eventually.
So the kitchen was redone, and you can see when I bought the house, this is shortly before I moved in, these are the original 1952 white metal Youngstown cabinets, even had the Youngstown tag there, and the original linoleum floor. And of course, when I moved in, I wanted something just a little bit more newer. So we ended up taking with the kitchen, and as I mentioned, the porch that was next to it that had been closed in, took those two rooms and tried to meld them into one. That's room next to it was a screened in porch. So at some point in time during the earlier remodels, they had raised the floors, but as you see on what the flooring was apparently maybe a siding, different colors, kind of a really pretty mishmash of aquas and blues and some brown woods and whatever. But once we stripped all the linoleum, there were multiple layers of linoleum and glue and some level of goo. Not really sure what this black mastic stuff was, but it did not go gently into the good night. So my plan was to leave this mismatched patchwork as is and just kind of enjoy the pretty colors. And when we couldn't get this black tarry substance off, we ended up just sanding the floors down. You can see on this photo, the floors in the porch were running this direction and the floors in the kitchen were running this way. And the same with the ceiling, is the ceiling was running one direction and it was beamed from where the porch used to be, and then the kitchen was not beamed. So this caused me a couple of days of grief here, trying to figure out how do I make this kitchen look like one large room. So after some consulting with the contractor, this is kind of what we ended up with.
Carolyn, just from my memory, if it serves me correctly, when I was a child, the refrigerator seemed to mirror the design of the cabinet somewhat. It was a pull handle refrigerator that I remember having in there for years.
Yes, and it actually still worked when we moved in. So it's and most of the appliances, I think all the appliances worked when I moved in. So it was quite the and you know, is everything old is new again. So everything from the 50s is now back in style, and people pay a lot of money to have an appliance look like it was from the 50s, but it was something that was just built a few weeks ago. But the decor, the style looks like it was straight out of the 50s. And I actually had that original straight out of the 50s.
I got a chuckle several years ago. Probably the Historical Society, I think they sponsor a Christmas tour of the homes.
Mm-hmm.
In one of them, I don't know what year it was, but somebody said they came into this house and they put, oh, it looks like a 1950s Youngstown kitchen. Well, that's what it was.
That's what it was.
That's why it looked that way.
Well, they knew, huh?
That's what Sweetheart wanted, so that's what Sweetheart got.
I'm sure that's exactly what Sweetheart got, even after some trials and tribulation of doing something different for a while. So my light fixture here is actually made out of oyster shells, and the little table here is a lobster trap that's been repurposed into a little table. So I'm very happy with this. Is now my version of the dream kitchen from Sweetheart's dream. So one of the other things that we've done here is the ceiling, which became a very unique and kind of a challenge, but a fun project. This upper picture is what, and Kimberly, this is probably the way you remember the house.
Yes.
The way with the fireplace, and this is the entrance into the dining room. This is all the living room with the high ceilings. And then the master main bedroom would be over here, and the front door would be in this area. So that all basically had to come out, but I wanted to save the very unique chandeliers that came with the house. So this slide kind of walks us through what that journey was like, where we stripped off all the ceiling and left this little medallion with the chandelier. And then at some point in time, it became too dangerous to have the chandelier then, when we needed to start putting back the ceiling. So my contractor came up with this idea of this kind of a round rotunda looking structure, which would house the chandelier. So as we took off the ceiling and ended up putting back, because everything that comes off has to go back. So we put the ceiling back, and this was the structure that he built. Very interesting. And I was quite delighted. This was something that he came up with in about 2 days of construction time. And this is what it looks like with the drywall put back in. And this is what, when we ended up, we put some of the coffering in the ceiling just to break it up and to give it a little bit dimension. My contractor had built a kind of a specialized crate just to hold that chandelier. We took it up to Wilmington and had it completely cleaned and rewired, and it sparkles. This is what it looks like today. It just absolutely jumps when you walk in the door. That's one of the wow factors. You see, the first thing you see is this absolutely totally magnificent chandelier. And Michael, you had a story about that chandelier as well. I thought it was older than it is, but I guess it's a little bit newer to the house as well.
Well, I don't know how old it is, but the Brunswick, South Brunswick magazine, you sent a copy, mentioned that you were pleased this was original 30s chandelier, and I passed it on that no, and I was talking to my brother Don, because I said, Lou bought this with Sweetheart's credit card. They were on a tour in Europe, and Don and Vicky were newly married, and they went with them. Lou kind of had several people going. My mother, I think an aunt, a friend of hers, Don and Vicky. There's about 5 or 6 of them. But they purchased this, I think Don told me, in Venice, Italy in 1972, and had it shipped to Southport. So,
And you've got a piece of Italy in the house as well.
Well, yeah.
My memories of that chandelier are that it was always the topper for the Christmas tree. There was never a star. It was the chandelier that topped the Christmas tree.
Oh, that's awesome. That would make an awful lot of sense. That would be a perfect topper for a Christmas tree.
And if you ever want to take a different perspective on the chandelier, I used to lay on the floor underneath it and just look up into it. And it's a whole different perspective on, I mean, I was a kid, of course, but.
Well, I'll try that. Thank you for that, Kimberly. That's, I think I'll go ahead and I'll try that.
Just my childhood perspective of the chandelier.
That sounds wonderful. So even the Florida room, which you're calling the Florida room, this was initially when I moved in, it was very dark paneled. It had the jalousie windows, floor, walls, ceiling, everything was a very dark cypress paneling. And this was actually really, truly the only room, the only place in the entire house that had just a little bit of minor water damage and just a tiny little bit of termite damage. So, and that was on this far wall over on this side next to the windows. Surprisingly, the rest of the house had no water damage and no termite at all, as old as the house was. So we ended up doing a complete tearing out everything in this room and replacing the ceiling with beadboard, of course, and shiplap, of course. And it is now the new sunroom, kind of a boho twist. And this is my little troublemaker ornery model down here, Miss Charlotte.
Sweetheart used to go in that room, and there was an organ over on that far wall where you were pointing out where the damage was. She would sit there and play the organ, or she would go out in the living room and play the piano. But that room for many years for me as Lou's niece was it was off limits, because that's where he did a lot of his writing and work in that space there. Yes. Yeah. He spent a great deal of time in there working on books and different things.
Well, as I'm giving this presentation right now, I'm sitting in where his desk used to be. That is now my desk. So I'm, once again, I get the inspiration from Lou. And it's interesting. This is probably the most colorful room in the entire house, which making that connection back with Lou, being a very colorful person of the Hardee family. This is, once again, it's kind of a tribute to him in my style and my design of the office here. So Lou is still here with us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So just a few more pictures here. This is kind of the front of the house in the last recent renovation. And the top pictures, I guess there was a pretty large snowstorm here in 2009. So you can see the snow on the house and what the house looked like. The center picture here is when I just initially first bought the house, and you can see that the house looks very different. There was a railing up on the top, but no railing on the bottom. And my understanding is Lou liked to be able to look out the street and not have any railing that was in the way. And this is a good friend of mine that came out to visit, and we put together 5 rocking chairs, which took the better part of the day. And she told me when we were finished, she said, I hate that guy named Alan Wrench. It said this was not for the faint-hearted. Putting a rocking chair together with many parts and nuts and bolts and screws were quite a challenge for the two of us.
I thought the big snowstorm was 1989.
There was one I have a picture of that was has a picture of your dad shoveling snow that I think was 1950 or 51.
Yeah,
And then another one I think in the 80s.
There was definitely one in the mid 80s because I remember we were driving into Southport and we ended up getting to the corner of Atlantic and Leonard Street, and we got stuck there in our van and had to get out and push the van from the corner to the driveway.
Oh my. I would imagine some people probably on this call maybe remember that that storm.
it's like a foot and a half, 18 inches of snow came off.
Wow.
And that's the pictures that Lou took, right, Dad, of the panoramic view that he put together?
Tim, you drove like from what's the capital of South Carolina?
Columbia?
Columbia. Came from Columbia to Florence, and that's where the interstate stopped because it started snowing, and I was driving. We got to I think the name of small town just inland from Myrtle Beach, Conway. We got to Conway, and as soon as we crossed that, not intercoast, there's a river there at Conway, and the snow was freezing on the windshield.
Wow.
We got to the bypass around Myrtle Beach and called home, and they said, Daddy said something about needing to stop and spend the night. Because it was Christmas, the day before Christmas Eve. And the kids were, well, we stopped where we called from was, Daddy told us, he gave us a credit card number and told us to get a motel. And I said, we need somewhere like I can't remember the name of the motel now. But anyway, as we left that 7-Eleven type store, we saw this big billboard, this motel on the 6 blocks to the ocean. And the next morning, the kids were amazed. Well, even when we got there and checked in, there was like a foot of snow on the Myrtle Beach surf with palm trees. And kids thought it was neat seeing the ocean roll in, palm trees with a foot of snow.
On Christmas.
And the next morning was Christmas Eve, and we drove from Myrtle Beach to Southport.
So you had your white Christmas after all.
I lost traction. That Kim said that we got stuck. I had to stop because the car was coming the opposite direction on Leonard Street. So when I went to turn, I didn't have enough traction to plow through the snow.
Oh, who'd have thought you'd see that in North Carolina? So with the evolution of the house, is that we've done a lot of work on the front, and one of the things that we added here was this brick walkway. A colleague of mine was tearing down, or goes through South Carolina, and he tears down old mills and he repurposes the bricks. So I asked him to bring a load of bricks up with him, and he did. So we ended up putting in a front walkway that kind of connects the front steps here with the railing in the front as well.
It's beautiful, Carol. That's the first time I've seen that picture. It's absolutely beautiful.
And it just adds, and of course we couldn't put modern brick. It just wasn't going to make sense with putting in new manufactured bricks. So it had to be something that, and these bricks were from the 1800s. So they're at least, once again, they're older than the house, but it was the right thing to do. We were so close. And this was one of the last things we ended up doing, was putting in the bricks in the walkway.
And are those few steps still down below there? Like
They still are. Yep. They still are. And they go out to the street at that point. So no love story would be complete without a discussion about the gem in the backyard here. Is the tree. This live oak tree is estimated to be 400 years old. And when I first bought the house, I had an arborist come in and he said, it's not 400 years old. And I looked at him and I said, well, but that's what I was told. He said, oh, no, it's probably more like 600 years old. And I thought, wow, I mean, how do you validate that? But it's a pretty magnificent tree. It's about spans probably about 150 feet, maybe more, from edge to edge here, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's kind of the gem, and you don't really see it. You have to kind of be in the backyard because it's hidden behind all these wonderful azaleas. But it's quite the showstopper when you come around the corner here, and all of a sudden the yard opens up and you see this absolutely magnificent tree. And Kim, you said you used to climb this tree, or you had a swing in the tree?
We used to walk up the branches because they span out so far and were so large that they would touch the ground.
Yes.
We would just step up on those as kids and climb up to the middle, and just as recent as probably, sorry, I'm getting a little choked up with this, but
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I believe it was 2018 after Lou passed, and we went up to the house, and my oldest son, he's 24, and he actually climbed up into the tree and just, yeah, we took pictures around the tree because the tree is just a treasure, and I'm so thankful that it's still there, and that, yeah.
It's still there, and it's thriving, and in this, you can't really tell from the picture. I was back there this past weekend cleaning it out a little bit. There's what I guess it's called a resurrection fern that's growing in the center, and it doesn't take away from the tree. It actually gives the tree some of the nutrients that it needs, but it's growing kind of in the center portion here of the tree. So it's a nice, once again, if this tree could tell stories, I'm sure it would have all kinds of stories to tell us.
Well, there are definitely lots of memories in and around the house, but there are also, for me, lots of memories wrapped around the backyard and that magical tree from a childhood perspective. From a child's perspective, it's just a truly magnificent place.
Well, and similar to the house, Kimberly and Michael too, I'm a caretaker here. I'm just one person in the long line of caretakers for the house and the tree. So we're happy to be part of its history.
Well, and for me, the next historical moment will be coming to see it as it is now.
Yes, and you will be probably recognize some of it. This is what it looks like today. We did add this in the floor. There's a medallion. It's a compass rose that is, as soon as you walk in the front door, it's actually centered between the front door and this bedroom door. And my sentimental thought on this one is so that way I will always have a direction when I'm in Southport, Sweetheart. And this picture was from the photo shoot we had, and I've got some pictures of that. But this is kind of what the living room now looks like with the Southport bows, and got the chandelier and my 100-year-old baby grand, which belongs in a proper house like this. And this was the photo that they took of the painting. And then this is the side with the new decking on it and the bay window in the kitchen. This is the new garden. It doesn't look like that now with the winter, but it will look like that next spring. And I generally cut a lot of these flowers from month to month or season to season and take them on down to the cemetery. And I give them back to Sweetheart because she needs to have these flowers with her too. So we do that every so many weeks. We go back and we visit the Hardee family and say hello. And I'm kind of feeling honored, like I'm part of Kimberly's family here. So what's next? So the next 100 years of the house here, this home's been through quite a lot in the 100 years. It's been on in its previous and current location. The renovation did take about a year, maybe a little bit longer to get all the way through here. I tried to give it a restoration back to honor its maritime and seafaring roots with the shiplap, but it also has got a lot of modern touches. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got a little robot vacuum cleaner, which spins around from time to time. It's got LED lighting. I've got my Alexa's playing in any given moment in some playlist of some type in different rooms around the house. And try to do a lot of blending the old with the new, keeping the character of the house, but yet modernizing it, bringing it up to this modern century. And it's a very comfortable place to live in. I've had some discussion with a lot of people that's it's being considered for some potential movie sets in the future here. The local film commission's interested in maybe doing some filming in and around the house in the area. possibly doing some events when allowed here in Southport. I had some interest in having some weddings and small events being taken place around the grounds in the house. This house has withstood a lot of events, a lot of weather events, hurricanes, winds, fires, floods, plagues, locusts, you name it. The house has been through, but it's stood the test of time. It stood the test of time to the family that previously owned it and built it over the various years and the remodels. And it's a lot of times when I'm out in the front yard doing yard work, there's inevitably somebody's going to drive by the house and people pull over and stop and talk to me about, I remember I met Michael and I did this and we did this together, and here's a story about the house. And the gentleman that does the yard tells me stories all the time. He did the yard and he actually did a lot of the remodeling in the house back in the day. So it's kind of this little gem that to this day people still stop by and talk, and I'm hoping to learn more about the Hardee family, because I feel like these folks in Southport know a whole lot more about your family, Kim, and I'm learning more from their anecdotes as we speak. So it's a very humbling place to be, and a very honoring thing to have done is to take this house and what I thought was going to be kind of a weekend renovation and just put kind of my heart and soul into it. And I feel sweetheart. I feel she's here and your family's here, and things that go bump in the night. I'm not sure whether it's my rowdy kitten here or it's somebody else just acknowledging that they're there. But I'm hoping to be on the house tour when available next year. And life goes on, and we're ready for the next 100 years, and the tree's ready. And we are here when you are ready to come and visit us, and welcome you with open arms, open tree branches. And let's see what the next 100 years bring us.
Well, I know this past year has been anything but usual or normal for anybody, but when you finally get the opportunity to be in the house around the 4th of July celebration, the festival that is in town most of the time, it's a treat to sit on the front porch and watch the fireworks from what you can see there. But the better treat is sitting and watching the traffic trying to leave Southport after the fireworks.
I definitely hear that. And we're lucky to be able to sit on the porch and watch them go by.
Kimberly, if I may add, this is Ann Smith. Carol and I have been friends for several years, and I've been through this with her. There is no one better to love the house that you all have loved.
Well,
she has made sure that everything she did was by Lewis's book.
It has not.
She sweated it out. She has.
Yeah, I truly believe that it has not taken me long to recognize the heart that Carol has for this house and for our family. And I believe our first conversation was on Messenger through Facebook when I first introduced myself to her. And she's the next generation of the house, or the next stage of the house. But I am so grateful to be, part of this with her and befriend her and help share our part of the history of the house with her. And hopefully when things clear up a little bit more, I'll get up there and walk through the house as it is now. And I'm trying to connect her with my daughter and my niece, because they had an experience several years ago where they were convinced that there was haunting in the house. So I want to.
Oh, great! I've spent the night there.
I want to connect her to them and let them tell the story from their own perspective, because it's a very interesting and unique story. So I'm very grateful and thankful to you, Carol, because I've told you this, that I was at a point where I thought that this particular place of my life was going to have to be written off, and I'm so thankful that it's not.
Yeah, and it's thanks for Ann. I appreciate that, and you being my neighbor in Oak Island there. It's you've heard a lot of my trials and tribulations about the construction and delays, and things weren't where we thought they would be, and things are where they were, and we never knew they were there, and so on and so forth. So yeah, thanks for being the kind of the shoulder there for me. And
of course, I was one that thought you were nuts for wanting to do it.
Well, and I'm not sure that I'm still not nuts. I know that I'm not too anxious to go remodel another house. I think I'll just enjoy this one for, the next 40, 50, 60 years or so.
But we all knew, our family at least knew, that the house the house needed to be loved on, and none of us were in a place to be able to do that right now. And I'm thankful that you came in and saw the beauty in it and took time and the effort and have done what you've done with it.
When you get here, you will be amazed.
I truly feel like it honors
and very
my,
happy.
yeah.
And
I really
the springtime, with the gardens, it's always interesting to see something blooming. And in the Lady Aster rose right on the front or the back door here, it still blooms. It's very pretty. People come by and they say, that's a Lady Aster rose. I'm like, how did you know that? And so I know those are very special roses. So that, to me, that's kind of the essence of Sweetheart, is in the gardens around here. And my hope is when things open up again, that we can have the Southport Garden Club meets back in the place where they started back in 1949, is kind of a tribute to Sweetheart and all the work that she and your family has done for this community, and being kind of a pillar, the Hardee and the Dosher family both being a pillar of this community in Southport.
Do you still have hydrangeas out the back room?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I saw one. I see you saying thanks to the State Port pilot. I didn't know it for several years, but James Harper and Margaret Harper did the State Port pilot, and then their son Jimmy, they stayed in that back bedroom. I think they partitioned it off during World War II.
Oh, wonderful.
Because there was a shortage of places for people to stay. Of course, Ed Taylor Harper was not born yet, but.
So lots of not only just the Hardee and the Dosher family have memories of this house, but many of the residents, the local residents in Southport as well, seem to have very fond and very vivid memories of being around your family, and Sweetheart and Lewis both, and the three sons, and all the wonderful things that the family has contributed to the town. And we're very, like I said, I'm just a caretaker here to pass it on to the next generation of historians, young historians, and hopefully soon we'll be open for business, and happy to give tours of the home.
Well, I know, Carol, that a great deal of friends and family and neighbors used to gather. I believe it was the evening after Christmas. So on the evening of the 26th, Sweetheart would host a massive potluck dinner, and people, family,
must go dinner. The leftovers must go.
that house would be full of people and tables set up everywhere with chairs, and we would all just fix our plates and go sit with wherever we could find a seat and just enjoy the company of each other.
Well, that's that'll be on my calendar for 2021. That will be scheduled. And hopefully the Hardee family will be able to attend that. All right, Liz. One last thing is on the lower corner here is a copy of the book that Lou Hardee Jr. wrote. And he's written a couple other books that are for sale. I don't know if you can see the cover here.
Oh, no, a commercial.
And his cookbook. And I'm actually trying some of these recipes. It's not the recipe that's going to fail. It's going to be the cook, but we'll work at it. And then the other book is the Three Southern Families. And I think you have all of these for sale at the Historical Society.
Yeah, I think the picture you got up now shows my father drinking water. I think that's the cistern well that's in either Crandall or Orange Bluff.
Awesome.
Because back then, when Lou wrote that Three Southern Families, there was no internet. So Sweetheart and Daddy would take Lou on trips down to these areas where Lou was writing about.
Oh, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful. And I thank all three of you for this presentation today. It's just been really, really good. Carol, do you want to stop sharing your screen for a second, just so we can see if anybody has any questions?
Sure.
So we'll get everybody's faces there. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments for Carol or Kimberly or Michael?
I had loaned the book of Home and River from Bob Surge and had a ball reading that thing. It was so entertaining, and I'm not from Southport, but I'll tell you what, I felt like it after I read that book. It was very, very interesting, historical, funny, heartwarming. So
it is. It's a really good book. And if people do want more information, more stories, it is available on our online store. So I really recommend it. And of course, the cookbook.
It looks like Jane had something she wanted to say.
Hey, Jane.
Hey, I wonder if y'all came across a picture that's on there's a black and white on page 13 in this Time in the River. Can you see it?
Pull it up just a little higher. There you go.
Okay. Lewis gave a talk to the Southport Historical Society years ago, and he had that picture. It belongs to Marjorie Clemens, and he had that and some pictures on display. And so I do a little watercoloring, and I wanted to watercolor that picture. And so he let me have the picture, the black and white, and I did do a watercolor. It's of the shrimp house, the Hardee-Trapp house.
Wow.
And so after I did it, I had a few copies made, and I thought, well, he was so nice to loan that to me. So I called, and I had never met Sweetheart. I didn't know she was called that. I called her Dorothy. And I told her what I'd done, and could I come by and give her the picture to give to Lewis. Well, she of course invited me in, and I stayed probably hours. I had the most wonderful conversation with her. Well, then after that, the house was on tour, Christmas tour. And when I went in the house on Christmas tour, there was my picture framed in that Lewis Hardee room. So I don't know if y'all come across that picture, but that picture was hanging there during the Christmas. He'd had it framed and had it, and he wrote, "Bought a home in the river," and he signed it, "To Jane, with extra thanks for the fine painting of Daddy's dog, Lewis, 12/10/08. So I'm so proud of this.
That's a wonderful story.
That's it.
The lady
Hi, this is Pat Kirkman. I just wanted to say hi to Michael and Kim. We've met in the past at your grandmother's and your mom's house and with Lou. And I have wonderful memories of the Hardee house. And I remember when we came to Southport 25 years ago, riding past the house. And I often thought I would love to know the people there so I could sit on that porch sometime. And in Providence, of how things happen, I did become a good friend of the Hardee family, especially Dot, as I called her, and Lewis and Lou. And I've had a couple of Thanksgiving dinners there with Lou and some friends here in Southport, and even went to New York and visited him in his apartment there. So I'm just delighted with what's happened with the house, Carol, and I have memories of it upstairs and downstairs, and even with helping Lou by telephone go through the house and bring some things out that he wanted shipped to New York. He was not able to come down. So I was walking around with my cell phone saying, okay, I'm in this room now, that room. And he would say, tell me the names of the books on the shelves or whatever. And wonderful memories of the Hardees, and so happy that I got to see them and be a part of their lives, and they a part of mine, very much so. So maybe I'll see you, Kim and Michael, and tell Jeannie hello, and it's good to see y'all's faces again.
Are you in Southport now? Is that
I
right?
am, yep.
Okay.
Never to leave. Well, maybe foot first.
I may not be there in body, but I'm there in heart and spirit all the time. So.
Oh yes, yeah.
What you got, Dad?
the lady that talked about painting a color of this picture,
Yes.
I can remember that Mary Mims is there. I remember she was babysitting us one year, and we always call her Aunt Mary.
Okay, she's in the picture, yeah.
And I can remember her, she had a, I don't guess she had a toothbrush, but back then they would get the root of a,
Sassafras tree, I think,
yeah, and use it for a toothbrush.
for their snuff.
Well, Pat, you're welcome anytime you want to come back and sit on the porch. Just come on over.
I would love to do that. Even if you're not there, if you see a strange gray-haired woman sitting on one of the rockers, it's me.
You won't be a stranger for long, so feel free.
Good. Yes, we'll meet up.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Any other questions or comments, anecdotes?
I wanted to make sure Dad put a face with the name of, and I'm already drawing a blank. Sorry, the gentleman from the Southport Historical Society.
Bob Surridge.
Daddy, do you know Bob?
No, yes and no. We've probably met for 2 minutes in the past somewhere.
Yeah, I think we have. Michael, if you have some time, you can hold on. I have a question about one of the plays that Lou wrote. If you can just hold on the line here when we end it.
Yeah, we're just wrapping up. So if you just want to stay for a few minutes after everybody goes, then you guys can chat. So I just want to thank you again, everybody that participated. This was wonderful. Yay, we've got claps going. It was wonderful to hear about, I mean, there were so many levels, right? The family history, Southport history, and also the renovations on the house. So a whole mixture of interesting topics today. And I want to mention next week, we will be having 2 programs. Monday evening at 7 o'clock will be our Southport storyteller, Mike Royal, Southport native, and he will be telling stories about Oliver's Grill, which generally everybody always says wonderful things about Oliver's Grill. He does have one bad experience at Oliver's Grill, so he's going to be telling that story as well. But he's going to be talking about that, his boyhood memories growing up in Southport. And then on Tuesday at 1 o'clock, I will be talking about Southport and the presidential election of 1876, which was and probably still is the most controversial election that we've had. And so I'll be talking about that on Tuesday. So I hope that you'll be able to join me for that. And then we'll be having our annual meeting, or our general meeting in January. Bob, what's the date of that?
It's January 28th. It starts at 6:30.
6:30 in the evening, and who will be joining us? Didn't mean to put you on the spot. We will be having a wonderful guest speaker that evening as well, and we'll also be going over what the progress of the Southport Historical Society over the past year. So hopefully be able to join us for that too. So we'll hopefully see you all next week. All right, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.